When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka GreaterSapien here. Things are getting pretty busy for me, and it looks to be that way for the next couple months. So instead of engaging in as much back and forth on the comment threads, I'll be responding on camera here. This way, more people can see the type of arguments and thinking I'm confronted with and get a little more insight into my way of thinking about things. For example, this week, I got a lot of comments from user PanelCam. Most of them were pretty useless statements like, "You failed," and I challenged them several times to show a coherent thought. So they thought they would display their prowess by critiquing my video deconstructing the lies of Dr. Robert Bennett and Shane St. Pierre. He writes, at time marker 258, Jerry starts moving the sea-Earth rocket ball goalposts with the following quote.
Dude, only the diameter of the sun is considered 400 times bigger than the diameter of the moon.
So, the claim here is that I've started to move the goalpost. But the problem with Pano's claim is that they need to establish where I'm moving the goalposts from. The whole point of my video is to point out problems that I have with the content of Shane's video. When Shane says something demonstrably incorrect, it's not moving the goalpost to point out his error. What I'm doing is pointing out that Shane made a claim that the established model says the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon and 400 times farther away, and so the gravitational influence of the sun on the tide should be about the same as the moon. Since the topic is gravity, we need to understand that gravity is not related to an object's visual size, but is related to its mass. When it comes to mass, the sun is much more than 400 times more massive than the moon. But let's say we do care about how much bigger an object is. Well, when we consider the size of objects, we usually think in terms of how many of the smaller objects will fit inside the larger ones. That's a volume question, isn't it? So even if physical size did matter with gravity, Shane's 400 times would still be wrong. Speaking of volume, Pano's critique continues. He goes on to state that the sun 456,000 times the moon's volume, allowing it to have 27 million times more mass. Could you cite this doublespeak reference, please? So this is an interesting one because it happens every so often with critics who are so focused on trying to win on one level, like here, they're trying to say that I've got some doublespeak going on, that they miss calling out an actual error that I made. It's not substantial enough to take away from my point. I don't have my notes on the video, but I don't know why the volume I gave is 456,000 times when it should be about 64 million times. Only one user, Larry Scott, pointed out my volume was too low. I would think more people would notice that my numbers meant that the sun was more dense than the moon, which it decidedly is not. You would think someone trying to undermine my credibility would take the time to check my math. Hell, the whole point of the video was checking math, which of course is where the volume number comes from, Pano, math. Volume has a cube relationship with radius with spheres. 400 times the radius and diameter, 64 million times the volume if we consider them perfect spheres for simplification. And 27 million times the mass is the current scientific understanding, which is what Shane referenced when he brought this up. Pano goes on. Jerry then asked,
Do you think modern science says the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon? Do you think modern science says gravitational strength has a 1-to-1 relationship with distance?
This is a non sequitur with no other object to serve than that of clouding the issue with I'll throw the question you never asked back to you, again in an effort to show your lack of understanding of my spinning sea-Earth rocket model. That's not a non sequitur. It's a rhetorical question. A non sequitur is a conclusion or statement that does not logically follow from the previous argument or statement. Given that Shane mentioned 400 times mass and 400 times distance, it actually follows that he might be making a one-to-one correlation between gravity and distance. Thus, I referred him to the inverse square law. So it's not that he never asked the question, it's that his statement caused me to question his understanding of the globe model. This is a classic GreaterSapien misdirection again, in the form of a question with his invoke of the inverse square law, followed by a cutaway side edit asking, "Come on, people, these are your heroes?" Misdirection? How was anyone misdirected? Did I bring up a topic unrelated to the gravitational relationship of the sun and the moon? The topic of Shane's video? No. Maybe next time explain how I was using misdirection instead of just stating that I did. From here, we have a Peanuts cartoon-like summary of Jerry sounding eerily similar to the classroom teach voice muttered from behind a desk speaker, blah, 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 blah. Now, I could try and take issue with this opinion, but I'm sure it's a valid one. And I don't find it to be a criticism at all, because my interpretation as a viewer of the Peanuts cartoons was that the womp 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 was just how the adults, the teachers and parents, sounded to the children who were never quite paying full attention. So if you're saying my explanation sounded like womp 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 to you, that means you see me as a child sees a teacher that they don't want to really hear from. If you made it this far without your head exploding, he eventually stated the math is right, but it is suspect with the claim of it's bad science. Jerry's view of science begin with the supported end in mind. Maybe I should consult The Great Serpent's Biggest Trick, a true and accurate flat earth tale, as a compendium that could uncloud the issue. Oh, man. Pano, once again, your criticism is inaccurate, because about 1 minute from the start of the video, I state,
Now, this video is an excellent example of how someone with a specific agenda can use accurate math to lie to an unknowing audience.
So I stated from the start that the math was good. Maybe you just weren't paying attention. The reason I said the math was suspect was because it wasn't needed, which I stated clearly in the video. And the reason I said the science was bad because Bennett was lying about what the math he showed actually represented. And I explained what the lie was. And here's the thing, Pano, and it's the reason I'm using you and your comment as an example. When I do a debunk like the one of Shane and Bennett, my goal is to be thorough. And being thorough doesn't mean just going through different claims and saying, nope, that's wrong. Nope, he's lying. No, I'll say, nope, he's lying. And here's what the math says. And as a physicist, he knows this, and thus he is lying. That's being thorough. My videos are fair game. I'm just a regular Homo sapiens like you, and what I say can and should be scrutinized. But be thorough, Pano. If I move the goalposts, if I misdirect, if I use doublespeak, don't just say that I do. Explain how I do. Because if you do that well, that'll be constructive and maybe even instructive. And I'll listen to that. Otherwise, it's just your opinion. And I don't give a fuck about your opinion.
That's my job! That's what I do! I don't lose! I win! Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.